Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Haunt Johns. I'm Courtney Maroc, your host and guide. And today with us, which way do I go? This way. You might notice someone's joining me. This is Luann Joly, right? Is that how I pronounce your last?
Yes.
Perfect. And if she looks familiar, maybe you watched a little documentary, a shock docs called The Curse of Lizzie Borden. You might have seen her on there. So we're going to talk with her a little bit today about that and some of, why is she in the paranormal field? So welcome, Luann. I'm so glad you're here. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you. So exciting to be here.
Hey, and so I had a question. So I sound good. Oh yeah, let's just kind of get into. We met because I had interviewed what is her name? Azure Hall from US Ghost Adventures, who recently purchased the Lizzie Borden house, or purchased it earlier this year. And during her and I conversate, her and I'm not saying I'm sure, but anyway, during that interview, it came out she had mentioned something about a previous family. I didn't quite have the history right, that there was another death at Lizzie Borden house and there were kids connected. And I didn't have quite the fact, she hadn't, and I didn't really know. So then you saw that and said, hey, I just want to, point out that, or maybe it was on the post when I introduced that Lizzie Borden and Doc was going to come out. But you said, hey, no, I know the history. This is what happened. So I was excited because I always like finding out. And it was about Eliza Darling Borden. Is that right?
Right.
Who was
Yes.
murdered, and oh, no, she wasn't murdered. She murdered herself, committed suicide, I guess. But she had also unfortunately murdered her children. So that's where a lot of people think the haunting with the kids comes from. But you knew, so you had said that. And then it kind of, you revealed some other things about, hey, I feel very connected to the Lizzie Borden case and I always have. So maybe you can kind of give us a background on why you felt connected and what drew you to Lizzie, or how Lizzie drew you to her. I don't know.
Oh, yeah, it's a confusing case all together, but here in this area where I grew up, I was born in Acushnet and grew up. That's like a town that's in the area of Fall River. Fall River is maybe 15, 20 minutes away. So we grow up hearing about the Lizzie Borden case. It's like, there's a lot of folklore and legends and curses and things like that here in New England. We had, there's a whole thing, New England vampires even. So, we grow up hearing these things, and the whole Lizzie Borden got an axe, gave her mother 40 whacks. When she saw what she had done, she gave her father 41. So, it's kind of there. But as a kid, I'm hearing this and I don't have a lot of facts. I just hear what people say about the case. So in my mind, I would think about it, and I always felt sorry for Lizzie because I didn't really believe she did it, even without knowing anything about it. So, years later, I've, experienced paranormal my entire life. As a kid, I was probably about 6 years old when I started being physically attacked by a negative entity. And it actually haunted me for 22 years, began attacking my children. At that point, you're a mom, you want to protect your kids. And at that point, it became imperative that I did something about it. And I didn't actually know if there was something that I could do about it. I didn't have, you're going back quite a few years before the paranormal blew up and everybody accepted it. The science fields don't exactly accept us still, but people in general started looking at the paranormal differently. And teams started to form, things like that. But this was before all that. I didn't have a lot of outlets. I was reading what I could find on the paranormal and different things that had happened to me. I've had a near-death experience. I've had precognitive dreams. I had a past life memory, and I'm being attacked by some invisible thing that, would toss me around and hold me down on my bed and scare the crap out of me. And my kids started to see a lot of things happening in the house, and it's attacking me. It's shaking the bunk beds of my children, and, being like this creepy black thing that crawled around on the floor. It presented itself differently to my children. It would, for me, it knew, being invisible was the best way to attack me, because if you give me a face, an enemy, it's something I can fight. But if you're invisible, I mean, there's nothing there. So instead of, as a kid, instead of saying, geesh, I need help, or, trying to figure out a way to get free, I was questioning my own sanity and afraid to tell anyone, because, I could have been locked up in an asylum or something. And that frightened me. So I did eventually meet the right person who helped me get free. And it was mostly me taking charge of the situation. Um, it was more like he helped me figure out what it was that I do. And there's a lot of paranormal stuff that brought me here, and I don't fit into any category. I've got psychic abilities. I do have empathic and medium abilities, but they're random. They happen when they need to. I can't say I'm going to do this and it'll happen. It kind of just has to happen naturally when I need it to. So I eventually realized that this was what I was meant to do. I mean, from the time I was born, paranormal things were happening to me, and I had to face a really scary situation on my own. So in a way, it's like I was conditioned to become a paranormal investigator and to help other families deal with what I dealt with as a kid. And I mean, we do get the occasional Casper investigation, and we have a lot of like research locations that we repeatedly go back to for that science purpose, because we have to follow scientific method if we ever want to be a science field that's accepted. So there's that. So there is a lot of work that I've been doing, but one place that I always wanted to go to was Lizzie Borden's. It's just a thing around here, the whole case. And was she guilty, was she innocent? It's actually like one of the oldest unsolved murders in the country, if you think about it.
Yeah, one of the most infamous for sure. Yep.
Definitely. But I always, like, looking into the case, the one thing, and I say it all the time, that she didn't have time between the time of death of Andrew Borden and people coming into the home and, being there. So think about that. It's not just, jump in the shower, ditch your clothes, get out the blow dry your hair, throw on a, underwear and an outfit. You didn't have a blow dryer, first of all. So the blood in her hair right there, she would have been wet.
Yeah,
She
she would
could
have
not
had.
have dried her hair, just her hair. My hair is maybe a little longer than yours. It takes a good couple hours to dry naturally without the help of a blow dryer. So, then you're talking from, petticoats and pantaloons and corsets with all those laces, and then, the overshirt and the shirt and all those laces and buttons and a skirt and an overskirt and then the shoes and the button hook. Come on. There was no way that she did all that before someone was in the house. So there had to be someone else involved with those murders. I kind of go towards Uncle John Morse, but we'll never know. But the case, I did eventually get to investigate Lizzie's house, the Borden house, several times, and from like the moment I stepped into the house, I knew there was something negative there. I get like a physical feeling, and I've gotten it ever since I was like 6 years old. When that thing was coming, I get like this feeling on my neck, like this crawling, like you just want to crunch your neck up, and it's this horrible feeling. Like human spirits give me a completely different feel. It's like they're kind of tingly, and it's not like an unpleasant feeling. So that's like the big difference. Like when I walk into a place, I know immediately what's there. So I'll investigate differently. But I mean, immediately there were threatening EVPs. There were, really strange things that happened, physical manipulation of objects. I'm sure if you've watched The Curse of Lizzie Borden, some of my EVPs, that is like the tip of the iceberg of the things that we've recorded in the house. So, um, you've got this piece of land where the Borden house sits, and I think people tend to forget that there's a lot of other history here that began before the European settlers came here and moved in on the natives. There is, Native American history that happened here. And, these were some of the first tribes that started to be decimated as the Europeans came in and took over America. And, there were already places here, like, for instance, the Hockomock Swamp. Hockomock in the Wampanoag language means the dwelling place of spirits, and today that's one of our land masses that we tend to investigate a lot,
Is
is
that
the
part of the
Hockomock Swamp.
Bridgewater Triangle?
Yeah, it's the heart. The Hockomock Swamp is the heart of the Bridgewater Triangle. And excuse me, um, the history of that first war, the King Philip's War, is, with everything that happened, it almost follows like what happened, the battles. I really feel like that triangle of activity is there because of all of the horrible history that happened there. And, and then more and more as, time went on, happened in these locations. But going back to Lizzie's, we've got this area, and not just the Lizzie Borden murders, like strange murder cases have happened there before. And, when the city was being built, I have a feeling that they kind of built on top of Wampanoag something, burial ground, sacred place. I don't know that, it was a beautiful landmass at one time with like, waterfalls running through it, things like that. They're all covered up now by a city, and there are limited places where you can see where these rivers still flow, Fall River. There's a, reason for the name. But getting back there, where the land that Lizzie Borden's house sits, I think was like maybe a burial ground, a sacred place, like I say, because in 1832, there was a skeleton found buried about maybe a block away from where the house sits. And it was like this big thing at the time because they thought it was possibly Native American, but at the same time, there was strange things about the way he was buried. Like he had copper tubing on his regalia, as they called it, his official, like, how would you even put it? Like the way that the Wampanoags dress showed their status.
Okay.
So he had, a very involved regalia that he was dressed in for burial. He was buried sitting up with this copper tubing on him. And at the time, the Wampanoags were not capable of smelting metal. So this skeleton, they had a lot of theories. One of them was that he was a Native American and he had had contact with a European, a shipwreck, or, someone like, pre-settlement here. Or he was someone that shipwrecked was European and somehow had gained status in the tribe that he would be buried in, such a way. But they'll never know because the building that the skeleton was housed in actually burned down.
Oh no.
So the skeleton is gone. We'll never know like who he was. But that, I think, sets up something that happened previously, or just the fact that the settlers came there and disturbed like sacred land, or there's millions of possibilities, but to me it sets up the area because you've got possibly sacred land or burial ground type situation, which almost sounds like a poltergeist thing, but it disturbed some type of negative entity. Chris Fleming and excuse me, allergies are like killing me today.
Oh no, it's that season for sure.
Oh yeah, wicked. Chris and Sam Baltrusis were kind of playing with the idea of like elemental type spirit, which is possible because you look at this area and we have, like, you spoke of Eliza Darling Borden was married to Ludwig Borden, who was Andrew Borden, Lizzie's father. That was his great uncle. And he didn't actually live in the Borden house. It was like next door to it on, let me see, like if you're looking at the house, the Borden house, it would have been like to the right.
Okay.
But the house isn't there.
Oh, it's gone.
Yeah. She actually had 3 children. And the third child, the oldest daughter, actually survived because she wasn't home. She was away at like a friend's house that day.
Oh God.
And she drowned her 2 youngest, who were 3 and 5, I believe, older. Well, no, I think he was 2. And oh geez, what is her name? Sarah? I think it was Sarah. They were really little, 2 and 3 or 4, possibly. I'd have to look at there's so many haunts up here. The history, like,
Gets
kind of
confused.
wicked sometimes. But she, she killed them, she drowned them in the cellar of her own home. That does get confused sometimes, that a lot of people think that they lived in the Borden home. But she drowned the two children in the cellar cistern, then went upstairs and used, I kind of think it's significant though, because it was her husband's straight razor that she sliced her own throat with. So you wonder, like, was there some kind of point being made with that? Did he cheat on her, or, was there entity involvement in this area? It just,
And
it's a
did they
weird
know for
time.
sure that it was a suicide, or could it have been that her husband?
They're pretty sure that it was suicide. Even with the crude forensics that they had at the time, it was a self-inflicted injury.
Oh, they could tell that.
Yeah, you can tell. Um, um, by the way that the slice is made, whether it's like, someone doing it or someone doing it to
Yourself.
themselves.
Maybe.
Then we go forward a little bit, which is right around the time of the skeleton, now that I think of it, to Sarah Maria Cornell, which we do mention a little bit in the shock doc, but that's a really sad story too. There's actually books on it, and amazingly, that's how we found Sarah Maria Cornell, was in a book. And the funny thing about it is the spirits were trying to tell us how to find her spirit, because we recorded these horrible screams. I mean, like, I'm in my headphones reviewing the evidence that we got at this other location, which is like throwing a rock distance from Lizzie Borden's home. And I mean, I literally fell out of my chair because I've got my headphones on. I'm reviewing evidence. It's right at the beginning of the recording when this happens. I mean, you can hear, we're oblivious to the screams because you hear me like talking about where we're setting stuff up, and, we're not hearing the screams, but I mean, my headphones probably went, "Wah!" and they're awful. It's like blood curdling, horrible screams. And then right at the end, you hear like a man, and he's like, "Who are you? Leave." And it's like, for years, we never had closure. Like, what was that all about? And as we're investigating the area, the spirits kept telling that we would find Marie, which Sarah Marie Cornell was her name, and all of her friends called her Marie or Maria. It was
Oh,
like her nickname. And actually, back in those days, it was common to be called by your middle name.
oh.
Luckily, I don't like my middle name, so I'm glad we don't do that anymore. But they kept telling us the book is with Marie. The book is they kept like just saying things about the book. Marie is in the book. I'm trying to remember the other. Have the book, I'm effing dead, which was like in an Irish accent. That's one of my favorite ones. He's just, have the book, I'm effing dead, with, and the location would have had Irish servants. So it makes sense to have like an Irish man saying something about someone that they probably had contact with. She was known to be very pretty, and she worked in a mill, and all of these people, socialized back then. But she moved here to Fall River. Back in those days, you would follow the mill work, because if one area, say, had a drought and the water wasn't flowing enough to
Oh,
turn the mill
power.
wheel, then the work would go somewhere else where there was a river with
Oh,
power. So she comes to Fall River and she meets up with this Ephraim K. Avery, and somehow we don't know, we'll never know if it was rape or willing, but she was carrying his child, and she kept having contact with him, asking, for a little bit of help when she can't work because she's had a baby, etc. And he sets up a meeting with her. And that was the last time that she was ever seen. She was found December 20th, I believe it was, 1832, hanging from like a hay pole. They use like poles to keep the hay like inside of them. Funny thing, her knees were dragging in the snow. So they did rule it a suicide, but it was shortly afterwards when, her friends from the mill are washing her and preparing her for burial, which, that's how they did it back then. And they notice that her arm is broken. It's bent. And there's these big, huge handprints on her hips. And it looks like someone had attempted to take the baby out of her.
God.
She was like, I think 4 or 5 months pregnant
Oh,
at
gosh.
the time. Yeah, horrible. And the guy got away with it. It was the Reverend Ephraim K. Avery. And he had all kinds of people come and give him an alibi for the time. But people actually reported to the police that night that they heard the sound of like a woman screaming and a struggle. And they found like she had a hair comb with jewels on it. It was like her prized possession. They found like pieces of it like down the street from the mill where they were supposed to meet, all the way to like practically where he hung her.
Oh, man.
Yeah. So, there's another violent crime. Then, you scoot forward and we don't know how many other little tiny crimes went on in this area. If you think about it, there were things that probably happened that didn't
Nobody.
get reported that we're
Yeah.
not going to find out about, but then you go forward to 1892 and same exact spot, landmass wise, you've got 2 axe murders. So is there something that lurks there and helps things happen?
And it's just tiny, right? Like the population isn't very big.
No, these are little, the cities down here in the southeast of Mass are, tiny little blurbs of cities. They're not, huge like Boston, or even Boston on, scale wise doesn't compare to, like New York City or God, LA. We're just tiny little places that were farm communities at, some point in history.
Oh, man. That's and what about another question for you that I was gonna say. Oh, about the when you guys did the seance, did you have I think I don't remember if it was one of the guys, I don't believe it was you. I think it was Dave said seances are, or it was Sam, I'm not sure, some of the most dangerous activities you can do. Um, how did you feel? Like, were you a little bit like, whoa, I don't, or had you participated in some before and you're like, yeah, it's okay.
Well, a seance isn't something that I normally do. Um, when I go into a case, it's more like I'm going to identify what's going on, and I'm either going to help the ghosts and the family live together by learning who they are through history. And a lot of times just kind of giving a face and a name to the ghosts in the house and understanding, them helps the dynamic. The family is not afraid anymore. Oh, that's just Mr. Reddy or whatever, that's just Mr. Robeson and his wife, or, you know, um, that's a little bit easier. When it's a negative entity case, then we have to go a little further. We have to get a blessing in there and try to get the thing out of the house and help the family, deal with that. That's a little more complicated, but with Lizzie Borden's, it's more of like a public place. A lot of people do some kind of crazy things in there, like the Ouija board, and I'm sure people have summoned things up, and that's how I feel like the entity, the A guy there, they say the name on the, I don't want to say his name because we have all had repercussions from him. He's not very happy with us, and Sam and Chris had as the mediums that were in there, they had a pretty difficult time after we left. But you know um there there were a few public events where I participated in a seance inside Lizzie's house, and the last one that I did in the house, the last time that I was actually in there, we did hold a seance on this pretty little antique table, and it was shaking and, responding to the medium. They had Elizabeth Nowicki, I think was her name.
Okay.
She was like the house psychic, and she regularly did like seances, and she always thought it was Andrew. And I know that was never Andrew. It was the entity. No matter what you call him, he's gonna come through. That's how he gains power. He thinks that house is his. Um, but we do the seance, and the psychic, which you're not really supposed to leave the circle. Once you open the circle, you're not supposed to leave it. And I kind of think she should have known better, but she did leave the circle to go into the ladies' room because she said Andrew was really angry and it was making her nauseous. She thought she was going to throw up, so she left. And I kind of continued because I was like, well, I wonder what would happen if I take over the circle. And I started saying things that Andrew might get upset over, that, nowadays women are independent and we can do whatever job we want. We don't have to be, the property of a man, etc., like that kind of tone. And oh man, I made it really angry because the next thing I knew, like the table jumped up off the floor and was trying to smash into my face. So I'm like holding the table off, and every now and then it would like slam back down on the floor, and then it would come back up. And I mean, there was a whole room full of people standing there watching this whole fight with the table go on. And I mean, I'm glad that table ended up breaking, because I don't know how much longer I could have kept holding it from breaking my face.
Did you guys
And
get that on video or anything?
well, somebody did have it on video, and I kept asking him to send me a copy of it, and he never did. And then later said that it got lost or whatever. But I mean, there was a whole entire room full of people there. So, and I had one of my teammates, Crystal, on the other side of the table. So if anyone was manipulating it in any way, and none of them were strong enough to
do that.
do. I mean, I worked with horses my entire life. I've always been strong, and I mean, I was like shaking from the effort of keeping it from hitting me, and then it smashed down on the floor, and it poor little antique table, like I still say it to this day, it was such a cute little table,
Oh no.
in pieces on the floor. So, you've got that in the back of your head, and they're like, oh, let's do a seance for the show. And I'm like, whew, this is probably not going to end well. And, they've only got the 2-hour slot. We were there for a week. The seance was probably an hour and a half in itself, because so much more happened during that seance than what they showed. There were some spirits who Sam helped cross over, and oh my God, that it blows my mind when you watch the seance. I am sitting there with my eyes closed, and I was telling Sam about it because, like, I didn't realize until I actually saw it on film. I reach out, I pick up the pen, and I start writing on the paper. But my eyes are closed, okay? And when I'm sitting there, I swear to God, I thought it was Sam grab my hand and then put a pen into it, and then put my hand on the paper, so I knew where it was. So it wasn't Sam who grabbed my hand and put the pen in. It something else during that seance, which, oh my God, it was so horrible. You don't even know. Like, picked up that pen, like it was like water flowing over my body to like see it on TV of me just with my eyes closed, reaching out, grabbing a pen and beginning to write. And like, it was a fight the whole time, because it was not Lizzie Borden, it was not Andrew Borden, it was not Emma or Abby or Uncle John or the illegitimate son William. It was that A-name entity in my head going, die, 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 like so loud. And it's writing, and everything in me is like fighting this thing, because Chris is like, oh, open up, Luann. And I'm like, okay, but the thought of what I do, and entities hate me. You don't know, like the human spirits love me. They're even the crabby, nasty, cranky, throwing stuff around the house because they don't like what you're doing with the renovations kind of ghost will usually interact with me. I mean, sometimes they're a little fresh, or I don't know, not really mean, but a little prickly, say. But oh man, the entities, they call me names, they say nasty things. They didn't show it. I have a little clip. I gotta clip it out. It's been so crazy lately, I haven't had a chance. But we're in the Lizzie Borden home, and we're having, oh God, all of our cameras, all of our everything, anything that ran on battery power kept dying, going out. So I plugged in one of my video cameras so I could at least use something. And I put it down on a table in like the front hallway of the Borden house, run up the stairs to use the ladies' room, come back down, and like right before I come down the stairs in the video, you hear it go, oh, and then you see my little feet come down the stairs. Like, that's the kind of stuff that the entities, they know exactly what I'm doing, and probably all of them know who I am or whatever because of what I do. Because I go to people's homes, I make them leave, So Chris is like, "Oh, open up, Luann, let it in." And I see it happen on the TV, and I'm like, "Oh my God." And I know my eyes were closed, but so like, boink, like nothing, pick up the pen and start writing. And like the thing in my head is saying die, and not like just us, everybody, like he hates everything and all of us, all people. He would love to get into every human being and destroy them slowly. Like he is not a nice thing. And at the end of it, I don't know, to get him out of me, it was like every good spirit that I've ever been with, like, kind of helped me get him out. And we, like, pushed him right out of the whole house when we threw him out of me. It's
That's what I was
so
going to ask. Do you think, is the
because I
Lizzie
don't let
Borden,
those things in. So
is the Lizzie Borden house still haunted then? Because after the seance, it sort of looked like, oh, it was cleared. But
well,
what do you, and is that dark entity still there?
that's the thing. There are human spirits there, and I see it a lot. Like, you'll have a location that has a lot of human spirits, and especially something like the Lizzie Borden case, like where maybe something bad happened, or a tragedy, or murder, or even just a whole family getting taken out by like a disease. That's a horrible, awful situation. And you'll have these human spirits who are kind of unhappy, and I don't know if like the entity was already there in the area or what, but somehow it seems to draw an entity in, and they get, I don't know, some kind of kick out of the human suffering. And that's interesting too. They didn't play it in the shock doc, but when we were out in Freetown where the Moss house was, I have the CVP, and it's like so clear as day. It goes, "Pay attention, Luann, humans suffer." So it almost makes me think that, like, my idea that entities enjoy ghosts, human spirits that are in torment somehow, that they come and they enjoy that or feed off of them, or I don't know exactly what it is, but I think that happens a lot. So the human spirits, some of them did cross over, I believe. Sam Baltrusis helped them during the seance, and that was actually beautiful. Like, I wish my eyes were closed the whole time, but I was like seeing the light and the little lights going to it, like the little spirits going, being free. And when that kind of thing happens, it's a miracle. you know um so it was something, I think, that was meant to happen. Like, somehow my coming into contact with the Borden house and the situation, and feeling like I wish there was something I could do. I wish I could help those ghosts, and how could I ever? It's a public place, and it's not like I can just get to go into the house whenever I want and do things like this. And then the whole production company came into the whole scene, and I, I thought it was just going to be a show. And then they put me with Dave Schrader and Chris Fleming and Sam Baltrusis, and something, the dynamic kind of happened, and the seance was almost like I don't know, like a long awaited for conclusion with my connection to the entity. It's like, for me, it got broken, because as long as like he was there and I couldn't do anything about it, he was always kind of going to be on the edge, hoping to get into my bubble somehow, so whatever we did there for me settled things.
Oh, good.
At the house, I don't know how long it will take, but I do believe, since it is still a location where the public can go in, the public can investigate, the public could summon, the public could open up the doorway again with the Ouija board that's sitting in the home, or just call him out. They know his name. It was on TV, and that's all it's going to take. And he thinks that house is his. He will
Come
take
back.
whatever opportunity to jump back in.
It's interesting you mentioned, because I was like, do I ask about that or not? And it was funny because I was like, I had it as one of my questions where I'm like, I don't know if it's good to say that. I know from being at the Red Onion Saloon in Alaska that they have a similar negative entity. They don't mind saying Lydia's name, but they will not, they don't even like to even bring this other one. They forget mentioning it. They don't
Yeah.
even like talking about, because they're afraid of drawing it. So I was like, I don't know if I should bring that back up if they got rid of him. And I had just one more question for you. I didn't mean to keep you so long.
I
With
get
your
talking about those.
with your other situation, that, I mean, the 22-year one are we gonna see you on like Eli Ross, A Ghost Ruined My Life? I've only seen 2 episodes so far, but it kind of fits. Like the 2 that they've had are similar, stories with, I mean, it came to them at different times, but I mean, have they contacted you at all about?
No, they haven't contacted me. And to tell the truth, it didn't ruin my life, though. I
Oh,
mean,
okay.
it made growing up very difficult, and maybe back then it felt like it was ruined. But if I take everything all in all, and there's so much in my life that, we don't really have the time to fit in there. But, look at what I do. It's like, even the dark, when it's something that kept coming into me, because the dark was trying to extinguish my light, to stop me from doing exactly what I'm doing right now. But they didn't stop me. They conditioned me for it, because, like, I'll admit that there was something that happened in the Lizzie Borden's house that I did not walk into. Well, I was, for one, alone. I knew if I walked into the room, I was going to be hurt. I'm brave and I'm not afraid of like entities and stuff, but I'm not crazy and I don't want to get hurt either. I'll kind of explain. I decided one night, we were in the house for about a week. I decided to go up and stay in the maid, Bridget Sullivan's room for one night. I had been staying in the Abbey murder room, known as the John Moss room, for most of my stay, and it had been pretty quiet. And I wondered, well, maybe if I go up on the 3rd floor where there's somewhat more of the negative stuff that I get on that floor in the past. So I go up there and I slept in Bridget's room. And that night, something about the house was affecting Dave. Because the whole time, I mean, he'd been great. We'd never met before. We kind of clicked. He's done a lot of shows, so he has experience. So, we were working together, friendly, nothing bad. But this night, he was giving off this vibe that I hate to say it, like I was kind of afraid of him that night. That it was just, it wasn't like he was acting strange or anything like that. It was just something, this feeling. And it's funny, this thought kept going through my head, like, because I know I'm going to be going up and going to sleep. And they kept telling me, well, if you're up on the third floor and anything happens, call Dave and have him go up there and you guys film it. And I'm like, there's axes in this house, because there's axes everywhere. Like,
Oh,
that's how weird the vibe was coming off Dave.
oh man.
I'm up on the third floor and I plug in my camera behind the nightstand so that if I need it, because that we were having the battery problems and everything kept dying. And something starts whispering in my room. And I'm like, okay, I guess I'm gonna have some activity up here. So I get up and I'm talking into the video camera. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm not calling Dave up here. Like, I was so afraid of Dave. I'm thinking if the entity jumped into Dave and started affecting him, he's like this big giant 6 foot, outweighs me by, God knows how many pounds. Like, he could kill me. And we're alone in the house. I can't get help or anything. I'm like, I'm not calling Dave up tonight because that vibe. So I'm sitting there and I'm talking into the stupid video camera and I sat hearing like this noise, like a rubbing noise. Like, what in the world is that? And I'm like, then my camera goes out and I'm like, what the heck? I know this thing is plugged into the wall right now. How the heck did it die? So I go behind the nightstand where I had the thing plugged into. The damn thing is like hanging out of the receptacle, the plug. So the rubbing noise was the
Oh,
plug going back and forth until it wiggled out enough to hang there and stop charging my camera.
oh, weird.
So I plugged the camera back in and like the whole house is wired. And I heard something like out in the front room. So I get out of my bed, I go out into there's like a sitting room and the chimney room where a lot of activity happens is right in front of me. And I get to the door and I'm like, I cannot go in that room because it's right there in the doorway. And if I go in that room, it is going to physically hurt me. And like, that's probably one of the only times where I did not walk into a situation,
Wow.
but I was alone. I couldn't call Dave, no witnesses, no help, nothing. If I walk into a room and an entity pushes me and I hit my head or, I wasn't taking the chance.
Oh my
So
God.
I went back in my room and went to sleep as well as I could with like a thing whispering in the corner. And that was another thing I wish that I had checked because I think during the time that I went out into the hallway, it was a way to lure me away because that night my recorder got nothing because it pulled the plug out of the recorder. My recorder, you can plug in a power cable and plug it into a power source. So that's what I did so that I could record all night long and not have a battery drain.
Oh
I get
no.
up in the morning and that plug is not in the wall anymore, and my recorder's dead and
Oh
recorded
no.
absolutely nothing. So it was like, no matter how we tried to get around the battery issue, it
It's
found a
still.
way to, throw that monkey wrench in our chain.
Oh my God. Oh my God. It's crazy. Well,
Even the production crew
was
had
having,
like multiple times when they had to go redo all the cameras because something was screwy and they would stop recording. And it was crazy with the actual equipment failure that for that. Like, it didn't want it to happen.
oh my gosh. It tried to stop it, but it
you know
did. So, I mean, finally it got through, and that's
but
good
that's the
because
thing, it as a child, because they say that like these entities can see forward and backwards and in time, and it's possible. I've had precognitive dreams that have come true. um so did this entity know that, later on in life, my ghost magnetism was gonna drive me to run a team that drives out entities from houses? Maybe. But in the end, everything serves the light. So no matter how hard it tried, all that it did was make me a more effective weapon, if you think about it. So who won?
oh, that's perfect. That's like the best. I can't end on a better note than that. And I have to thank you so much for taking your time and being so generous with it and setting this all up. And I'm glad I got to meet you. Thank you.
Awesome. I'm so glad we did it. I always love talking about the case, and it's like now it feels like it may not be a permanent resolution, but for me it is, because it was always going to be in the back of my head, like, what can I do? And maybe we don't keep it out of the house forever, but Lisbeth kind of gets some peace out of it. Like, I think we broke her connection from the entity and the house, and she can be at Maplecroft where she's a more peaceful spirit, and maybe someday she'll even be able to cross over.